Welcome back. So we saw how we can use a password manager. But now let me show you all the other options that you can choose from in case you didn't like the KeePass that we covered. There are multiple password managers out there and it really doesn't matter which one you use. The KeePass was free and easy to use, but you can also take a look at one of the options that we mentioned right here. So the first one is called LastPass, password management from anywhere, and they offer personal and business service, whichever one you're interested in, whether you're using it for personal use or you're using it for some type of a business that you need to secure. You can choose one of these two options. Besides Password Manager, it also offers a service of encrypting your files, storing any sensitive information or data in an encrypted manner. So it's not just a password manager, and you can read more about all of this right here. The next one would be NordPass, one of the most known password managers, and they also have personal and business plans, so whichever one you want, you can feel free to go with them. Now, these password managers are paid service, but they do offer 30-day money-back guarantee in case you don't like it. The next one is Dashlane, another password manager that you can give a try. And the last but not least is 1Password. Just click on Get Started and they should lead you through the steps of installing and running their password manager. Nonetheless, we already know how we can use it. We saw on KeePass, so it won't be much of a difference with any of these. What you will need to set up is a master password, and then you just join in all your other accounts under that master password, so they are well protected and encrypted. The most important thing to remember is to never give your master password to anyone and to store it in a safe place. Nonetheless, that's about it for password managers, and let's move on to mentioning why file and hard disk encryption is important and with which tools can we do that. See you in the next lecture. Okay, so we talked about protecting our passwords and making them more secure and stronger with password managers. But now it's time to shift our focus on file and hard disk security. Files are in most cases the most important thing that we hold on our device. So if we have anything that is of a big value to us, we must protect it. We already know that there are multiple ways of someone hacking your machine over the internet through various vulnerabilities or social engineering methods, but that is not the only way someone can access our computer. There is always a danger of someone physically accessing our device, whether we leave it on the table and go somewhere for a few minutes, or they simply just steal the entire device. They can present a threat to our data. However, to protect our data, our files, and everything that we have, we can perform hard disk encryption. This way, even if the thief steals our device, it will be useless for him since he won't be able to get the data from it. We will still, however, lose our device, but it's better than losing device and someone accessing your files. The hard disk encryption will usually require a password and a key that it will generate before encrypting all the files. These two are important to always remember and write down somewhere and store it in a safe place, since in case you lose them, you won't be able to access your own files anymore, which you don't really want to happen. Now that we mentioned why is hard disk and file encryption important, let's take a look at some simple tools that you can use to encrypt your files today. Okay, so I want you to visit this website right here, since this website has a good list of useful tools that you can use to encrypt your files, whether you're using Windows or Mac OS. Down here, it will give you a bunch of different options that you can choose from, such as something called LastPass, which you should be familiar with since we did mention it in the previous lecture. You can also use the default Windows BitLocker, and this can only be used on Windows, and it's a pretty useful tool to encrypt your drive. Down here you can read more about it, you can read which encryption does it use, and you can also take a look at the reasons why you should use BitLocker. Even more simple thing to use is FileVault for macOS. Down here it explains also which encryption it uses, and it does tell you how you can access it and how you can turn it on your macOS device. Besides these two default encryptors, you can also take a look at some of the different ones such as VeraCrypt, which you can download. Just by clicking on this link, it should lead you to their website where you can get their software. Same goes with each and every one of these that are in this list. Feel free to choose whichever one that you like. Usually the best option would be to go with the default ones such as FileVault or BitLocker, but it's completely your choice. Nonetheless, now that we covered this, let's take a look at some of the different threat monitoring tools that you can use on your device to figure out whether someone has infected it with a malware or whether there's something unusual going on your device. See you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. So in the next few lectures, we're going to mention a couple of different tools that you can use to monitor your own device. Now, these tools can be useful, for example, in tracking a threat or discovering a threat on your system. So let's get straight into it. The tool that we're going to cover in this lecture is called Process Explorer. Now, Process Explorer is a tool for Windows and it's made by Microsoft. So you can download it from the Microsoft official website right at this link. You can just type Process Explorer in your search bar, go to the Microsoft.com and download the latest version, which in this case is 16.43. You click on here to download it, and once you download it, you should be left with these files right here. Now, if you're running a 64-bit machine, which you most likely are, you want to click on procexp64. Double click on that. It might ask you for administrator password. If it does, just give the password and it should open a tool that looks something like this. Now, Process Explorer is something similar to Task Manager, just a little bit, or should I say a lot more advanced. You can see all the processes running in the background, you can see the CPU usage, you can see the process ID, and it also gives some other columns such as description and company name for all of these processes. Now, this tool is also useful when you want to discover whether a malware is infecting your machine. The first thing that you would ideally want to look is something that you don't really recognize. For example, VirtualBox VM.exe is running because I currently have virtual machine open, and that's why I know that it should run. But if you notice a process that you don't really know what it is, you don't recognize it, then maybe it's time to investigate. First thing to always check is whether that process has description or company name. Usually a process should be legit if it has a company name, such as for example VirtualBox says Oracle Corporation. All of these different Microsoft processes have Microsoft Corporation under the company name. But if you discover something that doesn't have a company name, then maybe you want to investigate further. For example, to investigate further, you also want to check the column Verified Signer. Now to do that, you want to go to Options, and you want to click on Verify Signatures. In just a few seconds, you should get this column, which will tell you which of these processes are verified signatures. We can see all of these are verified Microsoft Windows signatures. And if you find a process such as, for example, this one that says no signature was present in the subject, then that process is something to investigate furthermore. In my case, it's this one and these ones right here. They do have company name, so I'm pretty sure that they are Microsoft, but for example, this one, even though it's called Microsoft Photos.exe, doesn't have company name, and doesn't have a signature, so it would definitely be useful to check it out. To figure out whether any of these processes is malicious, you can scan it with VirusTotal. And VirusTotal is a website that offers a file scan with multiple antiviruses. You just upload an image that you want to scan, and VirusTotal will scan it with over 50 different antivirus vendors and tell you whether any one of them detects that file that you uploaded as a malicious software. To use it with the Process Explorer, all we have to do is click on Options, click on VirusTotal, and check VirusTotal. You will notice this column appear, and it will say hash submitted. All we have to do is wait for a few seconds, and after the scan is finished, you should see a number right here that tells you how many antivirus vendors detected all of these processes as malicious. In my particular case, none of these processes is being detected by any of the antivirus vendors. As we can see, 0 out of 74 antivirus detected this as malicious, so all of these processes are not malicious, at least according to all of the antivirus softwares. Now, a process can be investigated further if that's what we need to do. For example, even though this Microsoft Photos.txt wasn't detected by any of these 74 antivirus vendors, we can still investigate it a little bit further. We can right-click, go on Properties, and check out under TCP/IP whether this process performs any type of network connections. In this particular case, it doesn't, so that's good. We can check out all the other options if we want. We can check out the strings inside of this process or inside of this executable. And what's even more interesting is this down here that opens up. Now, this is the loaded DLLs that this process uses. To open the loaded DLLs, because you won't have this window open by default, you want to select the process and click Ctrl-D. Once you click Ctrl-D, this window should open up, and you should have all the DLLs that this process uses. You will also see that VirusTotal automatically scanned all of these DLLs to check out whether they're malicious. So if we go a little bit down, check out all the results, it doesn't seem that any antivirus caught any of these DLLs to be malicious, which is also good. So that is the basics of using Process Explorer. That's how you can investigate different files. Of course, this can go even deeper. If you want, you can investigate even more this process. Check out the properties, check out everything that it has. You want to check out manually which DLL it loads and see whether some DLL is loaded from an irregular directory or whether there's some DLL that shouldn't be there. And you also want to check out the description and company name of all of these DLLs just to make sure that it's legit. Now, besides Process Explorer, you can also use a tool called Process Monitor. It's also a tool from Microsoft, and you can download it the same way that we downloaded the Process Explorer. Just search Process Monitor and type microsoft.com, and you should have the download page that looks similar to this one, where you can download the Process Monitor tool. Nonetheless, this is how we can investigate and take a look at whether some file is malicious inside of our Windows environment. And you also notice that Process Explorer is a lot more useful and more advanced than Task Manager. We can't really do this many stuff with Task Manager. Nonetheless, thank you for watching this lecture, and I will see you in the next one. Hello and welcome back. So we talked about tools that are used to monitor different processes that are running on your system. But we are also interested in monitoring different connections that your device is making to the internet. That is also important, and we can actually find out quite a few things if we take a look at the connections that are being made. We can figure out whether some program is doing something malicious by perhaps communicating with a command and control center and getting commands and instructions from there. Or we can just simply see which regular processes are communicating over the internet in case that's what we want to know. Okay, so to do this, we're going to use a tool called Wireshark. Now, Wireshark is a known tool that is used to monitor network activity. You can navigate to the website wireshark.org, and from here you can download the tool and run it on whichever device that you have. Currently I'm on Windows, so I downloaded the Windows version, and I already started the tool since it's already installed on my machine. And once you start it as well, it should open a window that looks something like this. Here we're going to see our different interfaces, and what you want to do right here is you want to choose the interface that you are using for internet connections. In my particular case, I'm going to go with Ethernet, so just double click and it will start loading different network packets, and it will tell me their details such as source IP address, destination IP address, protocol over which it's being sent, length of the packet, and information about a certain packet. We can even inspect furthermore by clicking on any of them, and we can take a look at the structure of the packet itself. Now, if you open this, it will most likely just spam a bunch of different packets, so in most cases you would want to filter this output. So you can, for example, type TCP if you're only interested in TCP packets or TCP protocol, and you will be able to see only the TCP packets that are being sent. You can also see to where are they being sent, so this particular IP address, and if you're not sure whether this connection should or should not be made, you can simply just perform some information gathering onto these IP addresses to figure out where your data is going. But that is not quite practical way. If you really want to see whether some process is making a connection, you ideally want to do that over command prompt. Now, Wireshark is still a useful tool. You can also do a bunch of other filters such as HTTP in case you're interested in HTTP data that is being transferred. From where and to where are these packets going? For example, this is from my Windows device to the router IP address. So this packet is particularly going to the router's IP. But let's see how we can combine this lecture and the previous lecture to figure out which processes are making internet connections. Okay, so here it is, quite a useful tool, but we can close it, we don't need it for now. Once you try to close it, it will ask you to either save what you already captured with Wireshark, or you can just stop and quit without saving. Now, to figure out first which connections we have open, we can open command prompt. And once we open command prompt on our Windows device, we can type the command netstat-aon. If we press enter, it will list out all the connections that our device is currently making, and it will give some details such as local IP address, which in this case would be our IP address, or this Windows device IP address, which is 192.168.1.6, and to who are we making the connection to. These are the foreign IP addresses that my device is currently being connected to. We can also see the state, so not all connections are being established. Some are just listening, some are in the process of the three-way handshake, and some are established. And we also do get the process ID, so we get the process which is actually doing these connections. And in case you find an IP address or a port number that looks suspicious to you, usually the more suspicious things would be if you were to find the connection being made on a port that's not 443. Since, as you can see, port 443 is quite usual for different connections that are usually being made by Windows processes. For example, let's say I'm not sure what this particular IP address is and which process is using it. All I need to do is remember the process ID, go down here and type task list, and then /fi, open double quotes, PID, and then space EQ, and then the process ID, which I believe is 2512, that's correct. I close the double quotes, I press enter, and here I can see which exact process is doing this connection. In my particular case, it's searchapp.exe. And if you were to find a connection that's being made with a process that you do not recognize, you want to further on investigate that process to figure out why is it connecting to the internet and what's its purpose. Okay, but nonetheless, I just wanted to introduce you to this quick little command prompt thing that you can do. The netstat command is also something that you can run on macOS or Linux, so it's not only for Windows. This tool exists on macOS and on Linux, but you have to run it from a terminal, while in Windows we run it from command prompt. We also saw Wireshark, which is quite a useful tool if you want to inspect different network packets. And this method right here is how you can manually figure out whether certain processes are making internet connections. Okay, nonetheless, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture. So we covered Process Explorer for Windows systems, but right now let's see whether there is a similar app or similar program that can allow us to monitor different processes currently running on our machine for Linux and macOS. Well, there actually is, and it's called HTOP. Now, HTOP is a process similar to Process Explorer, and it will give a bunch of different information regarding different programs or processes that are running on your system. Now, it runs on both macOS and Linux, and to download it on macOS, you simply type brew install HTOP, and it will download it for you. While on Linux, you can use the regular sudo apt-get install, and it will install the HTOP for you. Okay, now once you have it installed, what you want to do to run it is simply type HTOP, and it will open the program. Now you will notice it doesn't look that user-friendly compared to Process Explorer, but it does cover similar things. So let me just enlarge this a little bit, so we can see everything better. And here are the current processes running on this macOS device. Now we have different columns right here, such as PID, which is process ID, the user that is currently running this particular process, the PRI is process priority, and a bunch of other columns right here, such as S, which is the current state of a process, and the command, which simply just shows you how this process was started and who started it. You also have some information about CPU usage, as well as virtual memory that's being used for this particular process, as well as the time of how long has this process been running. Okay, now you can monitor it like this, or if you want to learn more about it and figure out which commands you can run, you can simply just type H and it will open the help menu where you will see what else can you do with this program. For example, let's go back. If we type letter T, it will give all the processes but in a tree output. So we will see processes and sub-processes, such as this one right here. Now to undo this, in case you don't want it, you can simply just press T again, and it will undo the tree version of showing the processes. Backslash right here will open the filter down where you can type any process name if you want to find it. For example, we know what hprotect is, we covered it, so let's see whether we can find it. hprotect, and here it is. We can see hprotect service right here. And you can filter it simply just by typing the name, so it's rather easy to find a certain process. Now let me just close this, and another useful command is once you select the process and you press K, it will kill the process if you have enough permission to do so. Now I'm not going to do that right now since I don't want to kill any of these processes, but you can if you want to. And that would pretty much be about it. If you want to quit the program, you simply just type Q. And this HTOP is similar to the top program, which looks kind of like this. It gives the same output, but it's even less user-friendly So I do advise that you use htop instead, because at least it has some color to it. Once again, if you want to furthermore explore this program, type H and you will see all the available commands that you can run with this tool. Awesome. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, so we saw a couple of tools that are useful mainly for Windows investigation, such as discovering uncommon files and whether they're connecting to the internet and performing something malicious. We did a couple of analyses with Process Explorer, which gave us whether the process is verified, whether it's being detected by any antivirus vendor out there, and whether it imports some different DLLs or libraries that could be malicious. We also saw how we can figure out with the help of a command prompt whether certain process is making internet connections. But right now let's move on to a different operating system, which is Linux, since Linux is also widely used, especially as a server. So we're going to cover a quick little useful tool that can figure out whether our Linux device has been infected with a malware or a rootkit. Now, we already talked about what rootkits are, and for this particular lecture we're going to take a look at a tool called HACKMATE. Now, HACKMATE is not by default installed on Linux systems. If you are running Kali Linux, you can install it by running sudo apt install and then the tool name, which is HACKMATE. In my particular case, it will ask for password, but the tool is already installed, so there's nothing really to install or upgrade right now. But for you, the tool should install, and if you're running any other Linux, you can simply just download it from GitHub by using git clone command. Once you do that, you can run it by typing HACKMATE, and it will open the help menu, but this tool will require sudo privileges in order to run. As you can see, it has a bunch of different options right here, which we're not mainly interested in at the moment. We only want to see the tool in its basic settings. So to run it, or to run the basic scan for the rootkits that might infect your machine, we want to run this check command. Now, to do that, we can also run the short version, which is HACKMATE-C, but also remember that it will require sudo privileges, so I must type sudo as well. And as you can see, it will start performing checks. It will perform various checks, and on the right side, we can see whether it found something suspicious or not. If any of these files are okay, it will simply type OK. If it's not okay, it will either give a warning or it will tell you that it has detected something. This particular scan will run different methods that are used to detect different malware or rootkits or anything malicious on your system. And if you want to read more about this tool and how it works exactly, you can find more about it in the Kali Linux official page, since this is a tool that is by default added to Kali Linux. As we can see from the first scan, it gave us a warning about this specific file. So if you're not really interested what this is exactly, you can further on explore and figure out whether it is indeed malicious or is this just a fake warning. Now, to continue with the scan, we simply just press enter, and currently it will check for rootkits. And here you can see the list of different famous rootkits that could potentially infect your device. It will go through the entire list and it will tell you right here whether it found any of them. Okay, so it has finished for me. It didn't find any rootkit. As we can see, every single one of them is not found. And to continue with the next scan, I press enter, and now it will perform additional rootkit checks. So just in case that it did miss something right here, it will perform a few more checks just to make sure. And here it gave us one warning, so if you're running Kali Linux, this is a common warning that you'll get, especially if you're running on a virtual machine. So this is not really that important to us, we will get it, and we can just continue with the next scan since everything else is either not found or it's set to be okay. Now it will check the network, and it will check pretty much if there is anything suspicious inside of different files and different network connections. Here we can see that we do get two warnings, such as a SSH root access is allowed, which could be a potential security problem, and down here we have check for hidden files and directories, which is set to warning because there are hidden files and directories, but that is also normal if you're on Kali Linux. You can continue from here, and it will give you the summary of the scan. It gave us possible rootkits, and these possible suspect files or rootkits are simply just the warnings that have been given to us. You can check all of those warnings if you're not sure why they are there, but for these particular ones, such as this one or this one, I know why they're there. This is common result if you're running Kali Linux. Down here we will also see that all our results have been written to this log at this path, so we can check it out at whatever time that we want, and that would pretty much be it. You see how easy it was to scan for possible malware, rootkits, or any suspicious activity on Linux system. Now, of course, just because this didn't return anything doesn't necessarily mean that your device is not infected. You need to regularly update this tool so it does get different signatures and different rootkits to scan for, but you also must be aware that this tool might miss something. That is also a possibility. But nonetheless, this is a good start to figure out whether you're being infected if you're running a Linux system, and you can run this tool at certain period of time, such as once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on how much you use that Linux device. But nonetheless, thank you for watching this lecture, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, another important topic to talk about when referring to endpoint security are firewalls. Or should I say host-based firewalls? The reason we say host-based is because besides the host-based firewalls, we also have network firewalls. However, since we're in the endpoint security part of the course, we will focus for now only on the host-based firewalls and how they work. In short words, it's rather simple. We have an endpoint device, which is running the firewall software, and the firewall's purpose is to simply filter the traffic. Now, that would be the broad explanation, and sometimes firewalls can be used for more than just filtering, but the security aspect of a firewall is in filtering different network traffic. For example, it can decide out of all the other devices that are trying to connect to your endpoint device, whose packets can pass through and whose packets are not allowed to go through. This is important when we want to give access for some service only to certain people and not to everyone. These different filtering methods are all based on different rules that are being set up inside the firewall software. This is not done automatically, and someone has to precisely create a rule that will determine who can or who cannot access certain services on the system. These rules are not only generated for incoming traffic, but they can also be generated for outgoing traffic, or in other words, outbound traffic. This can be useful to set up for security measures as well. You can filter the traffic outgoing from your machine and know exactly if some program is trying to establish a connection to some command and control center, for example. In this particular case, that wouldn't be possible, so it adds a layer to security. Nonetheless, these are just brief things when it comes to firewalls. The more harder part is learning how to set up these rules. In the next video, we will take a look at Linux firewall called IP table, and that one would probably be the hardest one to master. That's why we're starting off with the hardest one. We will see how we can set them up, and we will see also how we can create some basic rules with IP tables. See you in the next lecture. Welcome back. So we mentioned in broad explanation what firewalls are. But now let's see how we can configure and run firewall on different systems. We will start off with the hardest one. As we already mentioned, we will start with IP tables. Now, iptables is mainly Linux firewall, and it sometimes can be configured with other programs that are almost always used as an interface for iptables. But this lecture we're going to directly interact with iptables and not through some third-party software. So first thing to learn about iptables is the word tables. It's consisted of different types of tables. We have filter, nat, and mangle table. Now, filter table is mostly what we refer to as firewall. It's responsible for filtering outgoing and incoming traffic, and filter table is something that we will devote this lecture to, since that is what's most important for us. The nat table is used to redirect any connection to a different interface, or it can also be used in address translation. And the mangle table is used for special purpose processing of different types of packets. Now, we will put aside the nat table and the mangle table, and as I already mentioned, we will focus on filter table only. Now, the filter table itself has different chains. It has the input chain, the output chain, and the forward chain. Each of these will process their own packets. For example, a packet that is being sent out of your device will be processed by output chain, while the packet that is being sent in or to your device will be processed by an input chain. And inside of those different chains, there can be different rules that are being set. Then the packet that is incoming or outgoing from your device will be processed based on those rules. Now, as we already mentioned, iptables is default on Linux, so usually Linux systems will have them installed, but in case you have some other software that is controlling the iptables through a different interface, it's best if you can uninstall it first, since that program might have some existing rules that might interfere with our current rules that we're going to set, and it might interfere with the iptables themselves. Okay, nonetheless, if you don't have Linux systems, don't worry, you can just sit back and watch. For any Linux security configuration or firewall configuration, iptables is a must thing to learn. So one day or another, you should sit and learn iptables, and in this video we're only going to cover basics. Okay, so first of all, to run iptables, we are going to use terminal. So it doesn't have a good user interface, it's only a command line tool, so we're going to set a bunch of different rules through different commands. To run it, you can type iptables, it will tell you which current version is here, and to check out different commands that we can run, we can type iptables --help, which will output the help menu for us. Now, to flush all the existing rules, or in other words, to remove any current rules, we can type iptables -f. Now, it will give us the permission denied error, so this means that we must run this command with sudo privileges, and as soon as we type our password right here, it should flush or it should remove all the current existing rules, which we can check by typing sudo iptables -l. Once we type here, we will see that no rule is being set currently. That is because we already flushed it with the previous command, but here we can see the chains that we talked about. Now, by default, this command will output only the filter table. It won't output the mangle table or the nat table. Here we have the filter input chain, the filter forward chain, and the filter output chain, and down below will be the rules that are set for each and every of these chains. Currently there are none. We also have in brackets the policy is set to accept. Now this is important to figure out what this means. By default, all three will be set to accept, but besides accept, it can also be set to reject or to drop packets. Reject and drop are similar, except when drop is set, it's as if the packet never really reached our device. It just gets dropped. Now, if you want to change policy, you can do so with the next command that we're going to run, but before we do that, let's type sudo service apache to start. And the reason we are typing this is just so we can start some service And once we input different rules, we can double check whether the rules are set correctly based on this service that we started. In this particular case, I started Apache 2, which is a web server, so currently our web page should be hosted on our local IP, which is 192.168.1.1. And if I try to visit it from my host machine and type 192.168.1.11, it will load the default Apache page, which means our web server from Kali Linux is running properly. Okay, awesome. Now if I go back and if I type once again sudo iptables-l, we were talking about this policy, and right now, since we already know that the input chain is being used to process incoming packets. So pretty much when someone visits our web server that we started, it will be processed by an input chain. Let's see whether we can change the policy to drop all requests for the input chain. To do that, we can type the command sudo iptables-policy, and then we type in the name of the chain, which in this case is input, and we type drop. Now you notice that we don't get any output, but if I type the -l command once again, the policy has been changed to drop. And now, even though our web server is running, every other device on our local network that tries to visit this web page, if I try to refresh, you will notice that it will not work, it will just load forever, and it will time out after a certain period of time. That is because our firewall, or in this case our IP tables, is filtering the input chain, and its policy is set to drop all the packets that are incoming to this Kali Linux device. If I go back, as you can see, it can't reach this page. So if I revert back to accept, now it should work. As you can see, I can, without any problem, reload this page. Okay. Now, this is to disable the entire chain, should I say, or to drop all the packets that are incoming to this device, but most likely you won't really want that type of security, since even though it is secure, it's not really practical. Now, let's try to set the rule for only one particular device that we want to disable it from visiting the Apache 2 web server. Now, we want everyone else to be able to visit, but only that IP address we want to disable from visiting the Apache 2. Let's give it a try. Let's try to disable my host machine from visiting Apache 2 web server, and to first do that, I need to know what's the IP address of this Windows 10 machine. I will type ipconfig, and it's 192.168.1.10. Okay. Now to craft the rule, I can type sudo iptables, and currently I will refer to the input chain, so I will type -I input, -s will be the source IP that I want to block. In my particular case, it will be the Windows 10 machine, or 192.168.1.10, and -j will be what I want to do with this rule. I want to make all the packets coming from this IP drop. Okay, and if I didn't explain, this -s simply stands for the IP that we will specify right after. Okay, so if I run this rule, and I go back to sudo iptables-l, we can see that the policy for input chain is accept, but the rule that has been added is for this particular machine to drop all types of packets on all protocols coming from this machine. Let's give it a try. I go back, I try to reload this page, and it once again won't work. That is because inside of IP tables, we set a rule that doesn't allow this machine from accessing this website. Now to remove the rule, we can simply type once again sudo iptables-flush, which will remove all the current rules, as we can see right here. And when you set up rules, you can be as detailed as setting up a certain port and not just the IP address. For example, you can type sudo iptables-I, and let's go with the input chain once again. And then you can use the protocol to be TCP only and destination port to be port 80. And you once again, let's say you want to drop these packets. So this time, if I run -l command, we will see that only over TCP, over port 80, it will drop all the packets coming from anywhere. Now, we could have also specified an IP address, but it doesn't really matter. You already saw how you can do that. This particular command will only block on port 80. So for example, if some other IP tried to visit SSH service, for example, it will still work, but port 80 won't work. Let's give it a try. If I reload, it doesn't work. It won't load this page. Okay, so those would be some of the basic commands that you can run with IP tables. Of course, if you want, you can always use the help menu to figure out if there is anything else of interest to you, and there are a bunch of different options right here, and some of them are not really explained that well, so perhaps you can also give a try to manual IP tables, which will open the manual for entire IP tables tool. This is usually much easier to read, and it does explain in much more details each and every option that you can use. So just type man IP tables and it will open the manual with all its available options. Now once again, one last important command is, in case you want to save these rules, you can type sudo /asbin/iptables-save. This command will save all the rules that you've set. Now, since in my particular case I do not want to save them, I'd rather flush all the rules that I created, so I'm currently left with no rules at all. Okay, so this was the hardest one to use, mainly because it's used over the command line and it does have a bunch of different options that we can set, but once you get used to it, with a bunch of different chains and policies and options to block out certain ports or IP addresses, you will find it rather easy. Okay, awesome. Now that we looked at the default filtering firewall on Linux system, let's take a look at the same default firewall on Windows systems. Hello and welcome back. So we covered IP tables, which was a filtering firewall on Linux systems. But now let's see what default firewall do we have on Windows platform. So Windows actually comes pre-installed with their Windows Defender firewall, which you can access simply by going to this search bar and typing firewall. And here you will see the settings, click on Windows Defender Firewall. It will open this page from the control panel, from where you can also access it if you want to, and here you will see the firewall settings. So currently I have my firewall turned on, both for private and for public networks, which you can see right here. And in case your firewall is turned off, I strongly recommend you turning it on by clicking on this button right here, though keep in mind that it will require administrator privileges. So currently my firewall is turned on. Incoming connections are set to block all connections to apps that are not on the list of the allowed apps, and this goes the same for the guest or the public network. Now, if you want to allow an app to pass through the firewall, you can click on this button right here. It will open this small window where you can navigate and find the app that you want to allow the firewall to let through. You can click on change settings and then you can set it up right here. If you're not sure what a certain app is, you can simply just click on this details button, which will give some description, but for most of the programs and applications, it won't really tell anything useful right here. Now, this would be the simpler settings when it comes to allowing app or program through a firewall. If you want to take a look at the more advanced settings, you can click right here, Advanced Settings. This will also require administrator privileges, but as soon as you give the administrator privileges, it will open this window where you will see the inbound and outbound rules. If you click on any of them, you will see all the items and all the current rules that are being set with all of its options. If I enlarge this, you will see there are quite a lot of columns, and they simply just give description to each and every rule that's being set. Now, depending on what you want to do, you can either go through these rules and figure out whether you want to remove any of them, or in case you want to add a certain rule, you simply just click right here on new rule. And the process of adding a new rule is rather easy. You either choose whether you want to add it for a program or a specific port, and once you do that, you click on next. Here you will enter the path to the program that you're adding the rule for, or you simply could also add a rule that refers to all the programs on this machine. Then click on next, and here you choose whether you want to block the connection, allow the connection only if it's secure, or you want to allow the connection from anywhere. Once you do that, you go right here, select for which networks you want this rule to apply for. So for example, when you select domain, it applies when a computer is connected to its corporate domain. This applies when a computer is connected to a private network location, and this will apply when the computer is connected to a public network location. And under the last one, you select the name, you simply just click on finish and the rule will be added. So that's how easy it is. For me personally, I'm not adding any new rules, so I'll just click on cancel, but this is simply how you can add a rule in a Windows firewall. It's rather easy. Now, of course, there are more things that you can take a look at right here, but these would be the most basic stuff. You open the advanced settings, you have inbound and outbound rules. Here are all of the rules, and you can add a new rule simply just by clicking here and setting up all the options needed. Okay, awesome. Now that we took a look at this, let's also take a look at the default firewall and how you can turn it on macOS. Now that we covered both firewall for Windows and Linux, let's see how we can open a firewall on macOS device. Now, firewall on macOS device is a little bit different in a sense that you don't really need it compared to Windows and Linux, where using firewall is recommended. But first of all, to start it, you go right here, you go System Preferences, and in this menu, you want to navigate to the Security and Privacy tab. Here you will see this tab that says Firewall, and to simply turn it on, all you want to do is click this button. Now, if you have it like this, blocked out, where you can't really click it, you want to click on this lock right here, and you want to input the password for your account. Once you do that, it will unlock the settings and you can turn it on by clicking on this button. For me, it's currently turned on. And down here it says the description, which is the firewall is turned on and set up to prevent unauthorized applications, programs, and services from accepting incoming connections. Now, if you want to take a look at these options that are being set, you can click on Firewall Options. Now, by default, it will look something like this. I don't think that you will have this enable stealth mode on. It might be turned off, but if you want to, for even more security, you do need to turn this on. As it says, the stealth mode simply doesn't respond or acknowledge attempts to access this computer from the network by test applications using ICMP such as ping. For example, when someone tries to ping you to discover whether your device is on, it won't show them. Now, the ideal secure settings would be to block all incoming connections. It says blocks all incoming connections except those required for basic internet services such as DHCP and IPsec. But for the personal use, you don't need to have this on. This will be more than enough. And if you want to add an application or software to this list, you can simply click on plus, select the application and choose whether you want to allow or block the connections. And once you're done with these settings, you can simply click on OK. And that is how easy it is to turn on firewall on macOS device. Nonetheless, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, this is a quick bonus video that I decided to add in this section since it might interest some of you and it does have something to do with the endpoint security. So we already mentioned that in many cases files are what's most important to a person on their device. And sometimes there are files that we want to get rid of or completely delete from our machine and we don't want anyone to see them or to be able to get them back? Well, as you maybe already know, when you right-click delete file from your desktop or from any folder, it doesn't really delete the file, not even when you clear it from the bin. Your file can still be retrieved if someone wants to. This is because the memory space where that file was will be declared usable, but the content of the previous file will still be there until a new file overwrites its contents, which can take some time. That's why here I have some articles that will talk about how to securely delete files or perhaps wipe entire hard drives by overwriting them. We won't be demonstrating it in this course since it's rather easy to do. All it takes is one tool, and these articles give a good explanation on how to use them. So you can visit this article at this link right here, and it does explain this in details, from starting off what happens when you delete a file to why the files that are deleted aren't erased immediately, and down here it can also show you how you can recover the deleted files and how you can prevent deleted files from being recovered with tools such as CC Cleaner, which you simply just install, and it's rather easy to use. Down here it explains how exactly it works and which options from this tool can you use to securely delete files. Another article that you can take a look at is this one right here, which talks about tools to securely delete files from Linux systems. So this was mostly referring to Windows systems, but this article will tell you how to securely delete files from Linux systems with the help of certain tools that you can install via the command line or via terminal. And on the third article, it talks about how to securely delete files on macOS. It will start off with explaining you how to use the rm command to delete the files through terminal, to explaining how to install a certain tool that will allow you to securely erase all the files that you do not want to be on your machine anymore. Now, depending on which system you're running, or depending on which system you're trying to secure, you want to navigate to each of these articles accordingly and read through how you can securely delete the files that should no longer be there. Nonetheless, let's not make this video any longer, and let's move on to the next lecture. Alright, first big part is done. But these are just your first steps to mastering endpoint security. There is more out there to research and more useful programs and tools that will help you increase your endpoint device security. Nonetheless, you have a strong foundation now to continue researching further all the topics that we mentioned in this specific section. In this video, let's perform a quick recap before we move on to the network security. As we already know, the main goal or main purpose of endpoint security is to secure and protect our endpoint devices. Whether that being a laptop, a computer, a mobile phone or a server, it doesn't matter. There are different things and methods that we cover to enhance security, starting from installing and enabling an antivirus software. We talked about default antivirus programs for Windows and Mac OS, and we also mentioned what other good antivirus softwares or endpoint protection softwares can you install and what benefit do they give you. Remember, the important note from these lectures is if privacy is important to you, it's always best to read the privacy policy of all the softwares that you install. Another important topic that we talked about are host-based firewalls. We introduced ourselves to the default firewalls installed on all the systems from macOS to Linux and Windows. We saw how we can use IP tables and which commands can we run to filter traffic on Linux systems. My personal advice would be to dive deeper into IP tables, since they are widely being used not just as a standalone software but also by various other tools and programs that control IP tables through their interface. We also saw the default Windows firewall, and we saw how to turn on the macOS default firewall in case we need it. Third important topic we mentioned were password managers. This is something 99% of us need if we want to keep our online accounts more secure. We saw an example of using KeePass, which is free to use password manager, and we saw how we can set it up with our online accounts. Plus, we talked about some other paid password managers that you can choose in case you want to level up your account security. And let's not forget the first topic that we talked about, which were browsers. Browsers are usually the things that we use the most on our endpoint devices, so it is important that we secure them the most. We talked about Brave browser, which has a bunch of different security and privacy settings that allow you to enhance your security online when visiting random websites. We also talked about more known browsers out there such as Firefox, Safari and Chrome, and how to enhance security in those as well. And a few other things that we mentioned were how to discover malware on Windows systems and how to figure out where the unusual network connections are coming from. We did all of this with the help of tools such as Process Explorer, Wireshark and Netstat, and we also saw an example of Process Explorer for macOS and Linux systems, which is called HTOP, and at the end we talked about how to securely delete our files in case we don't want anyone to be able to see or retrieve them. All of this in combination refers to endpoint security. But as I mentioned, this is only just the start, and you should dive deeper into each topic that we talked about even more in case that's what you're interested in. Let's also not forget another thing that we talked about before endpoint security, but that can affect endpoint security, which is social engineering. This can also present a danger to our endpoint device if we don't know what files are we downloading from the internet and if we plug in unknown USB devices to our machine, which can result in malware infecting it. These are all the things that we talked about already and that you should refer to whenever you want to secure a certain device. Nonetheless, we got one big topic behind us now and we're ready to dive deeper, perhaps into even more complex topic, which is network security.